Hello, and welcome to the Clear Voice Podcast, brought to you by Clear Career Professionals. I'm your host, James Groom. This week, Clear's president, Michael Boese, is in the studio. Welcome back to the show, Michael.
Thanks, James. I'm excited to talk about this topic with our guest, and many of the folks down in the Houston region will know who our guest is. We have the honor of having the Jersey Village City Manager, Austin Bleess, on with us. I met Austin a few years ago and just have always been impressed with how he's leading his community. They're very innovative. I know Austin is very passionate about leadership. And James, you and I have talked about that a lot, and something certainly we're always trying to continue our own growth and development and a good subject to put out. But the other thing that Austin is really great at is grants. And I know that, one of his skill sets is really knowing what's out there, some of the best things that cities can do to really make themselves competitive in that grant process. We're really excited to have that conversation with Austin. Austin, I'll got to give you a minute to talk a little bit about yourself. I know I didn't cover too much about your career, but we're honored to have you.
Yeah, Michael James, thanks so much for having me on here. I'm awesome as am the city manager here in Jersey Village. I've been here about 8.5 years. So that's like 2 lifetimes in the city manager world, I guess. But it's been fun. Been in local government for 16 years, with 15 of those being city manager or city administrator. Before that, spent a little bit of time on the state level. And while I was in college and undergrad, I had the opportunity to have a White House internship as well. Had some exposure experience on all levels of government. Really find that local government is where I feel like I can contribute the most.
What brought you to Jersey Village? Like, did you just see the job posted, or was there something that drew you to that location?
When people ask me how I got to Jersey Village, I usually say I-95 to I-10. It's a pretty good dad joke, but we were up in Caribou, Maine before here. We were at that point where it's like, okay, I think it's about time to start looking, and saw the advertisement for Jersey Village, read through the recruitment brochure, and got really interested. They mentioned a couple of times the comprehensive plan that they had recently adopted. And so I went out and read the comprehensive plan because I actually like reading those anyway. But read the comprehensive plan twice and just got really excited for the vision that the community had laid out for itself. Because it can't just be a city manager vision. It's the community's vision. They've got the buy-in, they've set the direction, the council sets the direction. And I got really excited. They talked about a mixed use development that they were working to do, and all the other things going on in the city that really excited me. Talked with my wife, and she agreed, like, yeah, go for it. And next thing you know, long story short, we're moving to Jersey Village from Caribou, Maine. So we drove through spring on our way down. It was like -17, I think, the day we left up there. And then when we got here, it was like 70, which for Caribou standards is a summer day. So I was walking around in shorts and t-shirts, and people were looking at me like I had 3 heads because they were all bundled up because it's cold. But it's been a good move, and 8.5 years here so far. And it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. We appreciate you being on the show. Can you tell everybody what or who shaped your approach to leadership the most?
There's been a lot of people that have kind of helped me learn over the years. Some city managers that I've learned from, both good things and bad things. One person I have a lot of respect for, Mike Land up in Coppell. He's a great guy. I've learned a lot from him. Brad Stafford, former city manager in Navasota, like I've chatted a lot with him about some of his philosophies and stuff. And those are just 2 of the many guys. Cliff Cahealy, another one. Like all those guys have really kind of helped shape me who I am in some of those things. But there's also a lot of non-city management people that I've looked up to, read about, or read their books. Simon Sinek is a big one for me. I listen to his podcast on a fairly regular basis. I've read his books. He's one that really kind of helps set that leadership framework for me of, how to lead, how to help others around you understand the goal. You start with why. Why are we doing what we're doing? It's not just go do this because I said so. Like, we need to do this because of this why. And really kind of leading with that. I'm a constant learner. This year, I've set a goal for reading 12 books. I think I'm at 9 at the moment, 8 maybe still. But I'm a big person. I'm a big believer in goals. I set goals. I talk about my goals. If anybody follows me on LinkedIn, you've seen me talk about goals in the posts that I do that every month. And it's those things that I think help me to be a good leader by A, showing what the goals are, B, kind of talking about the why, and C, just being real when the goal doesn't go the way you want it to go. You're not always going to hit all your goals, unfortunately. Being real about that and looking at that and seeing what you could have done differently. It's having those open conversations, I feel, has helped me be a good leader.
So switching gears just a little bit, Austin, we really are excited to be able to talk to you about the grants. And this is such a huge topic right now. I remember I saw you down, I think at the last conference we were at together, and you had talked about, your passion for grants and some of the things that you were working on. I feel like there's a lot of opportunities out there, but probably also some misconceptions and things. So this is a really great topic right now. What does the grant landscape look like? I know the federal government is kind of tightening a lot of things. It's probably much different this year than if we would have had this conversation just a few years ago. What's out there? What opportunities should cities kind of be paying attention to? And what are your thoughts on just kind of the overall grant scheme of things in municipal government?
I love grants. For me, it's always been a way to help get a project done. All of the cities I've worked in, every city, they've got limited budgets and limited opportunities to get things done on their own. So you need to look for that other revenue sources in order to get things done. City councilors talk a lot about not relying on property tax as much. And so that's one of the things we always try to do. How can we bring and generate non-property tax revenue to the city? And grants is one of those ways. Here in Jersey Village, I've brought in $31.8 million in grant funding. That's like for every dollar the city has spent on me in my 8.5 years here, I think it's about a $15 that I've brought back in grant money or so, which is huge. It's a return on that investment for sure, and it's about $1,500 a year for property tax owners. We've saved them every year. If we were going to do all these same projects in the same time frame, saved them about $1,500 a year over the last 4 years or so. So it really helps us to navigate that. Finding grants and stuff, it's not always easy. I would like to say I'm kind of working on that secret sauce a little bit, I guess, of how to track them all, find them, research them, and then really kind of diving in to the funding opportunities, the NOFOs, as they call it, notice of funding opportunities, reading through those, evaluating them, kind of picking up projects that definitely line up, but some that might take just a little bit of alignment to really match the projects that we have on a city level to match that grant. You have to be a little bit creative. You have to tell your story quite well and really show how you can match the opportunity that you have with what that grant is offering. It's been a fun journey, and I've done pretty well with the grants. Obviously, there's still grants that we don't get because of the competition and just sometimes the matching level of how well we can match our project to what the grant will actually fund. But it's always a fun chase, a fun hunt, if you will, of writing that grant, being the best you can, and then seeing what shakes from it, because you never know how you're going to stack up against all the other people out there that are applying for grants.
It sounds like you guys have been very successful in that hunt. In fact, I imagine that some city managers may not want their elected officials to hear how much you've brought in over the years. Can you kind of tell us what you think might separate cities that consistently land grant funding from those who may struggle to do so?
The biggest thing is going to be having the projects ready and having the data that you need to tell a good story. Grant opportunities, when they actually get published, you've probably got about 60 days to get all of your ducks in a row and get an application submitted. And 60 days might actually be a little bit long in some cases. So you'll know when grants usually post. That's kind of a regular cadence, especially federal grants, even some private sector philanthropic grants. They have that same kind of cadence. They're always going to come out roughly the same time each year. So go back and look at last year's NOFO, funding opportunity notice. What were they looking for? Those types of things. And you can have a good idea of what next year's is going to look like. So you can kind of have your mind thinking about some of those projects. Things like FEMA hazard mitigation grants. Those are ones we've tapped into a lot for drainage projects, flood mitigation, critical infrastructure, tightening those up like generators and those types of things. But having that data of how much have we lost power? How many critical facilities aren't backed up? How many areas do we need to add this to? Knowing all that beforehand gives you a step above. If you're behind the curve and gathering that data or knowing that data, when you see the opportunity, you might not have enough time to get everything back in. So it's really kind of being ahead of that game. That's why I think it's very important for cities to be thinking about it and actively preparing. One of the things I do with our CIP projects every year, we usually start thinking about CIP from a budget standpoint, April, May for the next year. And so I'm taking those ideas and I'm filing them into my little notebook I got, and then I start researching some of the grants that are out there that could come up over the next 12 months or so, and making sure that we're in a good position to apply for those when we get to it. It's all a preparedness thing, really. You have to be prepared to make the grant application happen when you get it because it's going to be a short time frame.
The larger cities are going to have dedicated grant departments that are going to have all that data available and be able to jump on these things. Your size city and some smaller ones may not have somebody who's not just a department, may not have a person that's their job. So some of these cities who are, having two or three hats, basically, do you guys compete for these grants, and do you have any advice for them?
From my standpoint, it's all about being prepared and making it a priority. Because obviously, you focus on the things that are priorities. And when you've got funding challenges, which we all do, and I think it's only going to get worse here in the state of Texas, we got the legislature trying to limit some of those revenue things even more than they already do. You have to be prepared. You can't be reactionary. You have to be proactive. And that's one of the things that I've built out or am building out, I should say, just from my own personal level. Part of it gets into data and researching and those types of things, which I love. I love data and data analysis. So I do nights and weekends with Python scripts and all those things, like pulling in data. And so you getting all of that together is one of the things that I enjoy from kind of my own nerdy level, I suppose. But it's all about being prepared and having that level of information that you know or know how to get it quickly if you need it.
After you land a grant, the hard work isn't over because you have to manage it at that point in time. That can be quite a heavy lift. Can you provide some insight, especially if like an elected official is listening to this, about maybe what some of these grants take time wise in the management post award, and any tips for how to do that easier?
And I'll also say some grants they'll have kind of like the pre-award notification where they call it like identified for further review, which is always the first step in that award process, where they might send a request for information or those types of things, and you've got to answer a few of their questions. Maybe something wasn't quite clear. So you get them that information back, and then it can take months or a year or more before you actually get that final grant award. So you've got all these projects that are out there in limbo, just kind of waiting to see if you're actually going to get it. We've got one, generator grant. I submitted the original application. I want to say it was, fall of 2023. We're recording this in September of 25, and we're still kind of in that limbo standpoint of, are we going to get it? Are we not? So it takes a long time for some of these decisions to be made. And part of that's the federal level right now. They've made changes and are just not being quite as quick as they used to be. But once you do get that grant award, it can be a lot to try and manage. There are companies out there that will do that for you, and you can build those costs into the grant application so you're not having to come completely out of pocket. A lot of grants have matching shares, so you do cover that. But there are companies out there that can do that. I like to do them when I can in-house, just because it saves the city some money. For me, it's kind of that data piece. Like, I've got all this data. How can we do it? And how can we tell stories? But how do we report that? And it's really just reporting back to the state or the feds of how you're using that money. It's just one of those things that my analytical side of me just really enjoys being a part of that. But it takes time, and you have to be willing to invest that time to do it. There's some grants, like I said, that are easier to administer than others. So while I do like doing it for some, there's some that I just won't touch. The other people that's more of their bailiwick, that's their wheelhouse. Let them handle those things. It's a great opportunity to learn it. I'm thankful that there's people out there that like some of those other grant programs more than I do. It helps us get a wide variety of things. The grant application itself is a lot of work, but then if you actually get it, the grant administration doing the project is also a lot of work and a lot of time to get it done.
Austin, it's pretty amazing as we're doing recruitments for city managers, across the country, and we're meeting with the mayor and council frequently in our actions when we're kind of planning the position announcement and who the council would really like to get in the position as far as characteristics goes. They always tell me somebody who has tons of grant writing experience. We want them to have at least 5 years of grant writing experience. And I always tell them, while there are city managers like yourself who have a passion about that and maybe through their career trajectory have come on and learned that skill set, that's a rarity in our field to have somebody that's that knowledgeable about grants. And so I always try to tell them we can put that grant writing knowledge is important, but as far as putting that as either a minimum qualification or even a preferred that they have specific grant writing experience, I always try to steer them out of that concept a little bit. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
It's not something that a lot of city managers do or take on their own. And obviously the city, the size of the city that you're managing is going to dictate whether or not you even have the time for that. My first grant that I wrote was, I was a community development director for the first year of my local government experience, and small community, 2,500 people. Wrote a grant there, was successful. It's like, this is fun. The city where I became first city administrator, town of 1,500 people, there you're wearing all sorts of hats. And so you're trying to do all of the things, and wrote a few more grants there and was successful. So it's kind of honing those skills there. I think for some people, it's a matter of how a person comes into those city manager ranks. Me, I was rural America, small town rural America, where you do lots of hats and you learn a lot of things. If you're going to a big city as a management analyst or something like that and kind of starting there and working your way up those ranks, you're probably not going to get that experience to the grant administration. Not that one is better than the other by any means, and everybody's personal lives have their own dictations of where they can or cannot be. But anytime I speak with college students or MPA students, I always encourage them to look at the smaller towns in rural America, because you can make a lot of progress in those communities and you can learn a lot about how a city functions, how you work as a leader, things you like, things you don't like. You just get exposed to a wide variety of things. There's nothing about my career path that I regret. I think every place has had a good step and I've enjoyed each of them. People that grew up in suburbs don't necessarily want to go out to a small town of 3,000 people, but you can learn so much. And it really, in my opinion, it helps your career kind of take off because you get that top seat, that top share, a lot quicker than you will if you're working through the same organization for years and years.
Yeah, yeah, and my career journey went, a little bit opposite. I worked for a large city and then transitioned to smaller communities, and I'll tell you, I worked so much harder in those smaller communities than I ever had to in the larger ones. It was constant learning and those kind of things because you don't have the staff that you can kind of go, hey, I see this problem, let's give it to so and they'll handle it. That person is you, and so it's it's a real interesting experience to kind of grow through those things. There's a couple of things we want to get to, but I want to really hone in on one thing about grants that I think are important because there is, a perception among city councils and some government officials that, come into office and they look at grants as part of their strategy. They'll look at, hey, we need a new water tower or we need streets, and we're just going to get a grant for that. And I think grants are amazing and you can kind of build that into maybe a strategic plan. But if you're counting on that to provide the infrastructure or the things that are essential for your community, that can be a real fail. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Grants are never guaranteed. Right now, we've got some pretty big water sewer projects going on in our community, from replacing pipes, but also treatment plants and those types of things. And we've got a bond referendum on the ballot coming up for November. And one of the questions I've had from residents is, well, why don't you just go get a grant for that? And my response is, trust me, I'm trying. I'm trying to get that grant. But if we don't get that grant, we still have to do the project. Like, the project has to get done one way or another. If we don't do this bond, and we're not going to be able to complete the project, or it's going to get delayed or pushed or whatever. And there's just some things that you can't fail at. And in my mind, clean water and a functioning sewer system are things you can't fail at, because if you don't have that, you don't have a community. Everything else in a community is based on that. It doesn't matter if that's police or fire, streets, you have parks and rec. If you don't provide that basic service of water and sewer, you don't have those other functions to work with. Grants are competitive. Grants are never a guarantee. You always have to have a backup plan. It's good to have them in the mix. It's good to apply for it. If you do get the grants and you don't have to borrow as much money, that's great. You can save some money on debt service or whatever. You always have to have that backup plan, because you can't fail when it comes to, a water tower or something like that. And I love to help out. I love to do things. If anybody's listening and they want to learn more about any of that aspect of it, reach out to me. I'm happy to chat about these things as well.
It's interesting as I get to present to public safety executives, I always try to tell them, as important as your roles are in keeping a community safe and responding to emergencies, the clean water and sewer are absolutely one of the top priorities. I think it's easily missed amongst our city staff how important the public works aspect of what cities are doing really adds to the quality of life in a community. As a city manager, the thing that you probably get the most complaints about are your roadways. When those roadways start to fail, that truly impacts the quality of life for a community. And so balancing that with grants is a really great thing. The next thing we wanted to get into was kind of more of leadership. I love what you said earlier about you're very intentional about your leadership growth. There was a conversation, and I would be amiss to our vice president of organizational development, Deanna Hendricks, if I didn't tell a small story. We were at a conference a few years ago, and Deanna is very passionate about leadership as well. and we were talking with a chief of police who is, just one of those chiefs who everybody looks up to and is in the field, and he was talking about, leadership, and he had talked about how leadership is a habit, and it was interesting because, Deanna kind of came back and really kind of debated him a little bit on, leadership really shouldn't be a habit, it should be a practice. And it was such an impactful conversation, Austin. I actually added a chapter in the book that I'm writing about that. In her opinion, a habit is just something you do, you get used to doing it. And there's a real danger in that. You look at leadership in that, in the sense that, hey, it's just going to come and flow. Whereas when you look at practice, it's something that I'm very intentional with. Like, I don't necessarily want to get up and work out every morning, but I do, because it's the practice that's important. And so I really like kind of the debate there. And whether you're on the habit side or the practice side, I feel like at least that generating that conversation is something that's important. We see this all the time in our organizational assessments. We'll come in, and a city will engage our company to kind of, look at a department and see, is there any problems with the culture? How are they performing, and how do we take them to the next level? And very frequently what we find is really great people who've got into a position and just stagnated there. And so, that intentional growth is so important. But kind of looking at that, how do you intentionally focus on your development, and why is that so important for you as the city manager?
There's a few things that I do to make sure that I'm continually learning, I'm continually growing. Some of it is going to conferences like TCMA, ICMA, going to some sessions, learning what other cities are doing, even if it's on a topic that has been talked about before, like organizational culture, those types of things. While I know the topics, some of the specifics as to how they're implementing those things, I can learn from. I can see what they're doing that's different from what we're doing. I like to read some of the leadership books. I mentioned Simon Sinek earlier. I've read his books. I've read quite a few leadership books. Atomic Habits is a great one. So I would kind of go to your habits or practices. We can go there in a moment. But it's all of those pieces of continual education. I like to read the Harvard Business Review. That's a business thing, not local government necessarily, but you get a lot of good tips, a lot of good management tips or insights into things, insights in how to companies work and jive. And a lot of those things can be translated into something you can do in local government. Don't get me wrong, local government cannot operate like a business. It's just two different sets of what the outcomes should be. We look at values and things like that, and they're looking at money, but we're looking at quality of life things. There is management theories and things like that that do translate between local government and the business sector. But you have to be willing to learn. I've had department heads say, "Oh, I don't need to go to a conference. I know everything. Those are all just fluffy. We don't need it." And that's scary to me, because if you think you don't need professional growth, we're not aligned. You need to be growing in your role. You need to be learning and exposing yourself to new ideas. If you're not doing that, we might need to have other conversations, because you need to be growing. All of us need to be growing every day. The minute we think we know it all, the minute I think I know everything about writing grants and stuff, I'm done. You can't have that perspective. You're always got to be growing and challenging yourself and doing something a little bit differently. But for the habits or practices, you have to practice your habits. How does a habit become a habit? If you get up and work out, you weren't born that way. Didn't it happen like the first week that you were doing that? You had to set your alarm and you had to do it. Like you probably didn't want to. I'm the same way. My alarm goes off at 5 a.m. And there's some days where, I'll be honest, I hit the snooze or turn it off. But there's a lot of days, the majority of them, I'm up, I'm out, I'm working out, I'm doing what I need to do to meet my goal of staying healthy and maintaining the healthy weight and getting my steps in every day. Habits are because you start these little practices, you do them every day, and that's why it becomes a habit. Build on it 1% better every day or every week, and just building on those things. And that's part of the reason why I'm so intentional about my goals and so public about not all my goals, but some of my goals I'm very public about, just because it gives me that accountability. It lets people know that this person is trying to be better. They're trying to build a better habit. And I hope that encourages people to do the same. And I've got a little sheet that I track all my goals on, and how am I doing? Am I on track, behind track? What can I do to get things where I want them to be? And it really just kind of helps me to see, what am I valuing in my life, personally, professionally, spiritually, and how does all of that play into who I am as a person, my whole self. I'm a city manager, but that's probably third on my list, believer, which is definitely top, and then the family as well. And how am I living all of those together in that work life equilibrium. It's some people say balance, some people think that's not possible. I kind of lean to the every day that balance is going to look different. Some days I'm going to have to work late. There's council meetings, there's whatever. But some days I'm gonna lean a little bit heavier to the family side. I'm gonna spend the day volunteering at my kids at school and being with them. Spending the day at church and with the discipleship groups and those types of things. So every day looks a little bit different for that balance in my life.
I wanted to bring up something. I know you and I are both familiar with Chad Wright and the work that he's doing as far as really looking at that inner self and keeping that inner self as healthy as possible as you're serving in these leadership roles. Something you mentioned, that if you've reached a point in your career where you just feel like you've got it and that there's nothing else that you should do, I always tell folks that's a self-awareness checkpoint, because if you recognize that you're doing that, you really need to evaluate where you're at internally in the position that you're serving in, because I think it can become very easy to become toxic if you just are stagnant and you're not demonstrating personal growth, especially if you're a leader and your people see that and feel it. Thank you so much for saying that.
I'd like to see what your chapter comes out to in practice versus habits. I'm almost thinking out loud that it may be a little bit of both. And, your habits, you have to evaluate those throughout the years to see if they're still healthy habits, because things change so quickly and not every habit is good in every situation. With leadership, I almost think that you have to continue to practice while you're making habits. So maybe it's a bit of both, but I'll look for that when the book comes out. Austin, talked a lot about what you're doing for leadership and these grants and everything else. Can you kind of talk about how maybe some of these things that you're doing, the personal growth that you're doing, how does that influence the culture inside City Hall, and how important is culture just in general in an organization?
Culture is everything, and that's something that I've had to be very intentional about here in Jersey Village. There were some issues when I first got here, and I think we've had to work through some of those things. It's really a matter of making sure that the employees feel heard, feel engaged, and feel taken care of. And that can look a variety of different ways. But when you have employees that truly feel like you've got their back, and that you want to hear from them and you implement some of the suggestions that they make, they're going to be more engaged and more productive for you. They're going to give back more than what they're taking in because they know that you truly care for them. And that's not just monetary. Obviously, monetary helps, but it comes to like new ideas or implementing new things, or if somebody comes to you with something that's going wrong in their department, you can't just brush it off. Like you have to go and investigate and look into it and take action if you have to take action. And that buys that level of buy-in with the employees, which is huge. Here in Jersey Village, we've been honored to be recognized by the Houston Chronicle as a top workplace in 2022 and 2024. The 25 results will be announced soon, so I think we've got a good shot. Looking back at my time here, 8.5 years in Jersey Village, thinking back to it, we've kind of done some of those engagement surveys because that's how top workplace is awarded. It's the surveys from the employees to really finding out how do the employees feel. From the first year that we did the survey, there was there was things that some of us didn't realize. Like, okay, we've got work to do, and so we set about that. We set about taking that honest feedback that was in some cases pretty brutal, like it was blunt, and it feel great to read. But you have to hear it as a leader, and you have to be able to act on it in a responsible way. I'm proud to say we've done that. And the first 2 years we took the survey, we didn't get the award, and then we made the changes, and people buy into it. They see that, oh, hey, this isn't just talk. This isn't just an email. This isn't just a meeting or whatever. Like, this is every day. This is consistent. They want to hear from us. They have our back. They want us to be a better version of ourselves, and so we've seen that in the survey results, and that's why we've been honored to get the top workplace awards. And that 2023, there was a few issues that we hadn't quite seen, and so when we didn't get the award, but we got the feedback on everything, we're like, okay, we've got a few places we need to work. It's continual. I don't take that award for granted. Just because we got it 3 out of the last 4 years doesn't mean we're going to get it next year. We got to keep moving forward, keep growing, keep listening, keep doing what we need to do to make sure the employees are actively engaged.
We've appreciated your time here and definitely some practical advice about grants and then, all the leadership talk. We really appreciate having that as well. If you had to leave our listeners with one piece of advice before you go about chasing grant dollars or building leadership capacity, what would it be?
Always chase the grant dollars, whether that's, internally with your own staff or externally, always chase the grant dollars. If you have questions, need help, whatever that case might be, reach out to me. Look me up on LinkedIn. I'm active there. I share lots of grants opportunities, but always take that chance. Honestly, it's same thing for leadership. Always take the chance in leadership to be better than you were yesterday. Never get into the mindset that you've peaked out and how good you're going to get, how much you can learn, or whatever the case may be. We always have to approach each day as what can I learn today? How can I improve? How can I be that 1% better with my time, my habits, my energies, and how can I continue to grow and motivate those around me? So always take that chance and always make sure you're trying to be a better version of yourself.
Michael, before we get off here, do you have any news from Clear or anything you'd like to share?
Well, we are prepping for some major conferences here in October, and Austin, I'm not sure if I'll see you at TML or not, but I certainly hope that you'll be there. We do have a huge announcement that we'll be making right around that time, and I don't want to spill the beans too much, but Austin mentioned something about faith earlier, and certainly for myself, that's a huge part of who I am, and really trying to hear that voice of God in my life. I really appreciate that it's impactful for him as well. But as this company has grown over the last 3 years, and I think we've had the opportunity to work with over 100 different municipalities in the 3 years. It's just really exciting for our team to be able to be impactful in communities. And because we're able to be impactful, there's a natural draw for people who have skill sets and the ability to serve communities that are consistently interacting with us and possibly joining our team. And so as we go through, we're really excited to continue having that positive impact. But Austin, I truly appreciate you being on, and if people are interested in contacting Austin, I encourage you to do so. He's somebody that I look up to and always enjoy learning more and more from. James, I also want to mention if they're interested in recruitments or some of our leadership training or even just an organizational assessment, they can look at our website and reach out. We are made up of a bunch of people who've spent their lives in municipal government and just really enjoy being able to get into these locations and organizations and have a positive impact.
Austin and Michael, I want to thank you for taking your time today to record this. And to the listeners, we appreciate you listening. Please follow us on LinkedIn and check out our website. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks.